Welcome to Casual Watch Talk, the podcast from the Casual Watch Reviewer YouTube channel. Join us as we talk everything watches, from watch collecting, the latest horology news and interviews. If you're not already subscribed, subscribe on your favourite podcast app. Let's dive into the show. Hello everyone, welcome back to episode 32 of Casual Watch Talk. You're joined by Sam from the Casual Watch Reviewer YouTube channel and Kris from Everyday Mastery Instagram. I've not said that intro for a while, Kris, but I thought I'd just
drive
hit the retro.
Yeah, you got to drive that Instagram for me.
How have you been this week, Kris?
Not too bad, hanging in there.
Yeah, we had we're really pumped because we had a really cool watch meetup from the Facebook group. So head over to Casual Watch Talk Facebook group. A big thanks to everyone that joined Kris and I for kind of virtual happy hour. I think we went over 2 hours, didn't we?
Yeah, it was just about 2 hours. Yeah, it was good, and it didn't replace a watch meetup, but it was definitely what everybody kind of needed, I think. Get together and kind of talk, and a bunch of folks sort of pointed out, like, maybe their significant others or other people that are in their sphere right now, in their lockdown sphere, are not interested in talking about watches. So it's kind of giving them, everybody, a ability to just, hey, I want to talk about this movement in this crazy watch. And it was like, oh, okay, yeah, everyone wants to hear about it. So it was cool.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and we'll definitely do that again. That was an excellent test run, and we proved out the technology. And maybe in the next one, with everyone's permission, we might record and throw it up on the old YouTube channel. I think that'd be interesting.
Maybe.
Well, we've got a busy news week to get into, but Kris, I'd love to know if you've had a watch obsession this week.
Watch obsession, yes. Speaking of the Facebook group, a bunch of us were talking about rally timing. And I had heard about this watch. Like I said, we kind of got talking about timing rallies, which is, time, speed, distance, and measuring that. And Sam, you mentioned my Curta. I have a Curta calculator that co-drivers, navigators used to use in the car to figure out that calculation. And then Todd posted a fantastic picture of his Seiko speed timer. And the speed timer was known as basically a rally meter because it has the bezel, it has the slide rule bezel, but there are no other markings other than to figure out your time to destination and your time and speed and distance. So there's no, you can't do any complicated math in it, but as far as if you want to find out how fast you have to travel in order to cover a certain distance, you can do it right on the watch. He had a great article sort of explaining how it works and all that sort of stuff. So we threw some links back and forth, and apparently Citizen made something very similar, sort of as a another thing to take the tachymeter bezel and then have it basically be a little computer to figure out, okay, and for these regulation or TSD rallies, you needed to know, okay, well, I'm doing 45 miles an hour and I have to travel 3 miles, and the checkpoint is here. Figure out what time I'm going to be there, and you have to be on time. You have to be on your minute. So you can't be fast, you can't be slow. You have to be perfectly on time, and that's what these are for. So very cool sort of tangent, but definitely a watch obsession for me this week.
What's my watch obsession been? Well, I've been trying to be good and not looking at too many watches online. I've got my Walbrook Skin Diver that I've talked about last couple of episodes on its way in. They've started to ship now. I've not quite got mine yet, but the anticipation has been building. People who received their Kickstarter watches already have been really liking them so far, so hopefully that will arrive soon, and that's been kind of stopping me from obsessing over watches. I got contacted, a little tease of a future review, I got contacted by a guy who makes watch straps out of different materials, including old footballs, American footballs, baseball gloves, old shoes, and things like that. So a little tease, I'm hoping to get one of those straps so I can do a review of that, because I think that's just really cool. Yeah. Repurposing old sports equipment into watch straps, so that should be interesting. We've got a couple of news stories, so Chris, as always, I'd love to get your opinion on these things. Let's start off with a few somber ones, and then we'll go into it. So I'll mention this one just because we've been following it through, and this is the ongoing saga with Baselworld, and would the Murdoch company buy them? And they did make an offer, and it was accepted. So they put £65 million, so probably around the 80 million mark, dollars wise. And that makes them the leading shareholder in MCH Group, the previous Baselworld owners. Baselworld, as we know, no longer exists. It's now Our Time. So it'd be interesting to follow that through, but that was the result, the culmination of that story.
Was there any sort of inside? Was there any additional information that we found that would make that company, for us to sit back here and say like 80 million? Well, that's got to be for the prestige, for the agreements that they had, there has to be something more there. What was the meat of that? They think that they were really making an offer for the Art Basel show. This story's from Watch Pro. In fact, most of the stories I'm going to talk about today are either on Watch Pro or have been featured on Watch Pro. There's not really a lot more detail. I'm sure stuff will come out. Yeah. We'll find out whether that Our Universe is a success, whether they made a wise business move there. Right. If it was picking up something for cheap, something you can turn around. And also to calibrate. I'm sure if you can imagine, if you've even seen 1, 2, or just a handful of pictures from the floor of the show, you'd get an idea of how many millions of dollars are being spent there. Being a part of that, or sort of having a controlling interest in that, maybe 80 million is a great price. So,
well, you'd imagine that they would have got some sort of bargain with everything that's been going on.
Yeah.
But anyway, next story. This one, I think it certainly affects me because I have sold watches on Chrono 24. I sold the Tudor Black Bay 58 and my Omega Speedmaster on
Wait, you sold
Chrono
that?
24.
You sold that?
Yeah, I did.
Oh,
I know. I keep getting reminded.
I send Sam a text message no, I'm just
kidding. Well, they've bought. I'm going to say they bought something back, but because they used to charge a buyer a fee,
right.
It might have been the escrow fee, but they're bringing back a charge of 7.5% a buyer's surcharge.
Wow.
So the seller will still pay the 6.5% plus the whatever it is for the escrow, which at one time that made it very interesting because that made it cheaper than eBay, which is why I did Tudor.
10+%, right? After PayPal and everything.
Yeah, and I don't know whether this is true, but you just get the feeling that there's more serious buyers on Chrono 24 than there are on eBay, I would say. For high-end watches, maybe.
Yeah, and I think they definitely lean into the if you want to go to a site where you are going to be shown that your watch can increase in value and that you could collect watches and make money. Not that we're advocating that, and not that you could do that, but if you start hanging around that site, you start to get the feeling, because they show you, this is what we got graphs, and we show you how much this has made, how much this has gone up in value. I mean, that's basically what their app is doing. So
I like that about their. That's good that you mentioned that. I like that about their app because you can upload your own watch collection in there and put the condition, and it will give you a price, but also stocks and shares type graph that will show you how your collection is increasing or decreasing over time, and that's free, which I think is a great feature. But anyway, more concerning is that they've now added a 7.5% buyer's surcharge. So whatever you sell the watch for, your buyer is going to have to pay 7.5%. Wow. And like the last two watches that I sold, also, if you're shipping them to another country, they've got to pay customs on the other end as well.
Right.
What do you think about that, Chris? Would that put you off buying?
It certainly makes me think about, can I figure out another way to make this transaction happen? And for them to do that, I mean, whatever they were making, they just doubled it, basically,
Essentially, yeah. They've been saying that this is a result of changes in the US tax code. It only applies for sales in the United States. I forgot to mention that at the start.
I see.
Essentially, it's the US tax structure and warranty-related refunds and stuff like that. They're saying that in order to make it a profitable business, that's what they'll have to do.
Okay.
It would affect us because we're obviously selling from the US regardless of where the...
So, I mean, we can get a little into this. I mean, so in the United States, we have a concept called Nexus, where the product originates from. And one of the things that sort of happened in e-commerce and is happening in e-commerce right now, and everybody who's ever purchased stuff on eBay, you have now a bunch of e-commerce sites that exist that have to pay taxes in various states. So it used to be eBay was kind of this Wild West where bought it and it got sold to you, but it's from, Atlanta or, and Georgia doesn't have to pay, a person in Georgia doesn't have to pay California sales tax, and a person in California doesn't have to pay Georgia sales tax. Well, because of this worldwide place we live, and we're all connected now, and also a lot of brick and mortar stores are closing up shop, and we're moving into this. I mean, I think every year we see e-commerce tick up higher during the holidays. So absolutely, yeah. So eventually, the tax man cometh, and they want that revenue. And so now if like Amazon, it's just everybody charges tax for everything. eBay's getting there too, depending on what state you're ordering from, too, this sort of thing. It's kind of this we're losing out on this tax shelter e-commerce land. So maybe that's maybe that's what they're setting up for, so that when that happens, they can say, we'll just pay the tax for you, which would be great. But I feel like they'll also additionally, if they're not selling in Delaware, or if they're selling in Maine or Massachusetts or something, and there's a 9% sales tax, they'll tack that on there too, which kind of... Because
I noticed this recently with... a lot of these places are in New Jersey, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
A Joma shop is, and a camera shop, that B&H Photo, I think they're based in Jersey as well. Right. And I noticed that they never used to add tax, but now they do. Yeah. It's a bit worrying, but we'll see how we go with that one.
I mean, and it also, it certainly opens up to other ways to pay. I mean, I think we talked about this back when I was selling a couple watches, where, if I could figure out how to, transfer $1,000 via Google Pay or something, or Venmo, I think will only take a max of $250, something like that. If we had a secure way to pay each other that didn't have to we have to pay tax on this stuff all the time. And also, I could probably go off on a diatribe for about an hour on paying for tax on something that you already paid tax for. So I'll stop right now.
Exactly. This is the thing with pre-owned on eBay now, you're having to pay tax. But anyway, that's a whole separate thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's get to more interesting watch-related subjects. I think one thing that caught our eye, and I know Dave, who's a friend to the show, who runs LPW Watch Supply, wrote an article on this on Scottish watches. But I'm going to quote stuff from the Watch Pro article, and this is Bamford, who do make they're famous for making custom Rolexes and things like that. They've joined with a company called Black Badger, who basically, I'm making a very high summary of this, but they essentially find interesting materials to make jewelry out of. So they've joined forces and they've made an El Primero, where the case is made out of a superconductor cable, which they're typically used for, it says on the Watch Pro article, MRI machines, particle accelerators, and nuclear reactors. So they're saying it's essentially made from a cable for nuclear reactors. It's really interesting. They've taken a cross-section of the cable, they've turned it into a watch case and then applied an acid to it, and it gives it a very interesting, I'd say, post-apocalyptic look to the case. I mean, they want a small fortune for it. They want £14,000 for it. Yeah. But I think it's interesting. It's good to see there's these different materials.
Right. Yeah. I think this is well done, and it looks like what it is. It's if you cut what you would think a futuristic superconducting material cable in half that has the hexagonal pattern of all of the individual conductors sort of smooshed together in a process, I'm sure. And then, and then just cross section that, made a case out of it. It's very cool looking.
And then the first of two G-Shock stories, one we're probably going to go into a little bit more detail, but something that I've noticed, a trend certainly on YouTube and definitely on watch forums, is there seems to be this trend of taking the G-Shock, the Casio as it's called, or the G-Shock Oak, the GA2100. This is the Casio as it's known, and people buying Royal Oak style cases off AliExpress, off eBay, and then turning these watches into essentially.
Didn't Jody just do one? And
Jody just did one. TGV did one.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know, Chris, is this a bit of a gimmick or does it look cool? And I'm only asking because I haven't decided yet whether this looks weird or whether it looks cool.
Yeah, I think you have to like lean into it because it's a little over the top, I think. It's like this super shiny band on top of it that sort of like adds to it, so it's already big boy, and then it like adds additional heft to it.
Yeah, there is one that definitely looks, I mean, they've done a really good job.
Right.
If it looks as good in the photos, then it has the hexagonal screws.
Right.
It has the band, the very distinctive Royal Oak band, which rectangular sections with rectangular ties to it. Mm-hmm. If it looks half as good as in the photos, then they look pretty cool. It's just I'm still a bit undecided about whether overall I think it looks cool. I mean, TGV certainly enjoyed
it. Yeah, exactly. It's definitely one of those. If I had that on my wrist and I walked into an event, like a watch meet, I don't know if I'd get thrown out. I'd be like, sorry, man, you can't bring that in here. It's like we're serious watch collectors here. So I mean, it's a little. Certainly, it points out the little, tongue in cheek of the fact that like, of the few of us that are going to be fortunate to be able to afford a Royal Oak, why not have some fun with your $90 Casio?
Exactly. Okay, now on to a much more as an interesting G-Shock. G-Shock had just announced a limited edition samurai-inspired Master of G, or Mr. G, I think they're calling it. It's in titanium. It's limited edition, but it's the process that they've used on the titanium, they've engraved it to look like the helmet of a samurai warrior. So it has a finishing on it that's loosely translated as rusted metal, I think. Mm-hmm. And then they have a very famous, I'm not going to try and say his name because I'll murder it and I'll have to apologize. But essentially they have an expert engraver has engraved a dragon on it as well. This is another story from Watch Pro. Limited edition to 400 worldwide, and they're charging around about the $9,500. Mm-hmm. I'm really interested to know what you think about this, because last week we had such the back and forth about limited edition watches and what I class as what I would say is a limited edition watch, and this falls between the two.
Yeah, and I think so. This is another. You commented earlier on the page or the group. The work that they're doing, the engraving that they're doing, is not all that complicated. I mean, you kind of posted up a picture of if you've seen any of the like where they engrave every link on like a Rolex Datejust, something like that. That's super intricate. Like this is kind of just got a little engraving on the outer bezel kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, everyone should definitely take a picture, take a look at the picture of it. When I first saw it, I felt like, oh, okay, whatever, Casio. I literally was like, I'll just give him a pass. And then I was like, wait a minute, I'm so critical of like other watch companies doing these like one-off special editions with like, where they change the color. And I was like, why would I give Casio a pass here? And I started to really sort of like think about it and get into it. And so we can talk about it now, which is, I think one of the key parts of this is, yes, this is a Casio that is, that has special materials and special colors. It's not the only one. There's 15 versions of this Casio that you can buy for a reasonable price. Okay. So I feel like in special editions, often the regular one is no longer available.
You're right. Yeah.
So they, so it's like, oh, well, we used to have this one that was just a black dial and white hands, but now, we don't make that anymore. But now we have this special edition where we made a blue one, and we're only going to make 1,000, and that's, I think that's one big part of the special edition magic, where if the regular one is available, like, so this Mr. G, like, I'm sure that, like, I'd have to do a quick search, but I'm sure the regular one's on sale and available and reasonably priced. And they'll mass manufacture a gubajillion of them, and it's great, and you can go pick one up right now. Where it starts to bug me is, where it's not, the original is not available, and then the special edition, and then the next part. And Sam, what do you think about that?
I'm in agreement with you. This doesn't bother me as much as other limited edition watches, and I'll add something else. The reason why it doesn't particularly bother me as much is because this is a Japanese company. They're taking the Japanese history and directly relating it to this watch, and using a very skilled, well-known Japanese craftsman to do it. Mm-hmm. It isn't based on a made-up history or a borrowed or a cartoon or something like that. It seems like they've created a watch. And to your point, really, they've said, hey, we've created this special edition watch. We really put everything we could into this. This is how expensive it is. Or you could buy the regular one. Exactly to your point. There's not. This isn't the own. It's not that different that you feel like you're missing out.
Right.
If you just bought the ordinary one.
Yeah, and I think again with the special edition, I think that and we've seen this with special materials, and this is a good example of like sort of a titanium that's been colored and like a special finishing process that they've done to it. Okay, so like special materials, like again, it's almost to the level that it's like an art piece, that it's a collectible, like a collectible art piece. Whereas I feel like sometimes you get these brands that will, it's not that unique. It's not that, it's like, oh, it's got a, it's like, oh, we put a red second hand on it, and it's like, oh, it's, it's limited edition. It's twice the price. And you're like, why is it twice the price? Well, because it has this red second hand on it or whatever. I'm oversimplifying it, but there's sort of that feel like, there, I think, is more of a line where you can draw to say like, okay, yes, you've made a decision as a brand to make a special edition. What makes it special besides what the marketing department's going to say?
Exactly. And the gentleman here is hand engraving this dragon on every single G-Shock bezel. For people that might think I'm being hypocritical when I call Omega out for the 3-2-1 movement, this gentleman is hand engraving 400 of these.
Right.
Omega are restricting how they make them. In my view, they could easily knock out the 3-2-1 movement in the many thousands if they wanted to. But this is a direct result of literally somebody having to carve 400 of them.
Yeah. And right. And that's another good point where you've got a craftsman, and I think the Swiss watch industry hides behind that sort of craftsman a lot, in the way that we've talked about, like all of this manufacturing is like automated now. This is what I mean, like Rolex, like the big boys, Rolex. If you're pumping out 100,000 watches a year, they're like, humans are not involved. They have robots that are making this. Yes. Watchmakers are maybe assembling the final product, doing some QC, checking the thing, and various bits and parts throughout. And there are definitely processes that robots can't do that humans have to do. I totally get that. In the sort of beauty of watchmaking, when you get to 100,000 watches, versus, like you said, hand engraving 400 of these.
Again, it didn't give me quite the visceral reaction as something along the lines of the Hodinky Blue Alpinist or something along those lines.
Yeah, where something that you wanted. Yeah.
Like you said, there's other versions. I mean, this is their most expensive G-Shock. I think they range RRP, they're in the $3,000 range anyway. Mm-hmm. So they are the most expensive G-Shocks you can buy, but they're not that dissimilar from other G-Shocks in the range as well. I like what they've done here. It's interesting. And also, they do limited editions in more affordable lines as well, like the Blue Note, which is based on the famous jazz club in New York and a record label. Casio made a limited edition one of that, and they didn't make a big song and dance about it.
I mean, I've talked about it on the pod. I bought my wife that Casio Pokemon.
Yeah,
we were looking at it the other day. It like comes in like the Pokeball, and it's super geeky cute, and just it was like she was like, well, it's like, oh well, that was like a special edition. You had to like, I was like, it's $100. Like it was completely reasonable for what it was, and it comes in this cool packaging and whatever. Yeah, so absolutely, they do special edition stuff. They do special edition limited stuff all the time. That's completely reasonable. And earlier when I said it's something that you want, let me just clarify, just so that like. This watch is not to my taste, but if it was something that I want. But just to say that the standard edition is something that you wanted, and the fact that you couldn't get it because a particular piece of it was limited. So that's kind of what I was saying.
Absolutely. And if you're interested in watch engraving in general, I did a review, an interview. In fact, it's one of my favorite uploads I ever did, and I interviewed David Sheehan, who is really a master in watch engraver. He's stunning. He does work for all over the world. He engraved Rolexes, and he engraved a samurai warrior down the band of a Rolex. Looks just awesome. It's horrendously expensive to do an entire Rolex. It's upwards of $10,000, but to get something like a dragon or something along those lines engraved up the side of your existing Mr. G, you could get somebody third party to do it probably for a couple of $100. But anyway. Okay, well, before we dive into the main subject, which again...
Hey, it's Kris from the Casual Watch Talk podcast. As our longtime listeners know, we often talk about cars here on the pod, and that's no coincidence. Like a lot of mechanical watch lovers, we're both into cars and racing. A couple years ago, I curated a collection of automotive-inspired straps and started the Campionato Club. Campionato Club watch straps celebrate the rich history of automotive liveries with their inspired colors. Available in a single pass NATO, two-piece, and our new super comfy elastic NATO. Check out Campionato Club on the web. That's championship in Italian, CAMPIONATO.club.
Is one that I've been really fascinated in. Let's just pause for a very quick ad break. Hi guys, welcome back. Our main topic for today, and this is pretty interesting, I think. I'll let you kick it off, Kris.
The watches and watch brands that never made it to the United States. So the Swiss brands that aren't really sold here, and that, I mean, we now have access to over the internet, but don't really have a presence here.
Yeah, and ones that are certainly, if you can get them in the US, they're more of an enthusiast would find them instead of you just randomly stumbling across them. They're certainly larger in other countries. I liken this to a lot of the car brands that we have in the UK versus the US, or even different models.
Oh yeah,
Volkswagen comes to mind. Over here, Volkswagen starts at the Golf is the base model, but there's several different versions than that before in the UK.
Yeah, I'm mentioning cars like Lancia. So the first time, I've seen a couple imported in the country. And I was at an event at a rally, and someone had a Lancia Integrale, and I just stopped. And everyone around me is like, "What is like a car? It looks like a fancy, kind of like a fancy Volkswagen, coupe from the 90s, right?" And I'm just like drooling over this thing, and my regular non-car guy friends are like, "Okay, so it's a car," and you're like, "You don't understand." So very similar to that for sure.
Yeah, that Lancia Delta. I mean, that was a rally icon.
Oh, yep.
And the Integrale as well, was it?
The Delta, the S4, and the and the Group A afterwards. It was great.
So, do you want to kick it off then, Chris? What do you want to list them, and then we'll talk about each one after you've mentioned it, and I'll. There's some that I have experience of myself, but we're definitely interested to know. Anybody can post pictures on the Facebook group if you do own one of these watches. That would be really cool.
And actually, it was the Facebook group that kind of kicked this off. So I'll start with that. So we were talking on the Facebook group about a brand that doesn't get seen here, and that's Edox, EDOX.
Yeah.
And sort of never made it to the United States for whatever reason. I was looking at where their stores are, because I was like, they must be here. And I think you're more likely to find one in Mexico City than you are to find one in North America. And certainly all over Europe.
Yeah, and a big thanks to, I think it was Robert that posted that, and I think he posted one of the other ones as well. He's a real, he's on our group, he's a real enthusiast of dive watches. He kindly sent me that ISO frame strap, so a big thanks to him. But yeah, he seems to collect these dive watches, and also he's really interested in the history as well. He posted the one of the other ones that's going to be on your list as well, but he posted that Edox, and this was one I wasn't familiar with, but it's a good looking watch.
Yeah. And so I mean, this company, this is Swiss. This is 1884. I mean, this is an old brand. They've got some great looking stuff, and so if you're looking for something that maybe is unique on the wrist that not everyone has, this is definitely one of those brands. Great, pretty good value for money too, I think.
Yeah, really good value for money. I like that one. So what's the next one?
So then we'll move on, and these are in no particular order. This is just completely random. But Eterna.
This was another one from Robert, and I straight up asked him. I wasn't sure about who Eterna were. I feel like I knew the name, but I hadn't really looked into them anymore. But this is a very good looking watch. Like you mentioned, this one again goes back to the 1800s, and I didn't realize this, but Rob was telling me that they created ETA.
Right.
And originally, I mean, that's amazing that that's not a really common thing that people know. I'm surprised I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I recognized the diver. So I've seen a couple of these pop up on Instagram. It's the Kontiki, the Super Kontiki.
Yeah.
Like a cushion style, almost like a turtle case to it. And so if you're in the market for that 70s diver, sort of retro diver look, definitely take a look at the Kontiki and their divers. Very cool stuff.
I love the hands as well. And also it has the date as well, which keeps me happy.
That's right. And down at 6. Very balanced style. Looks really good. I think they've got one that I'm looking at, the one that's got the sort of orange lume on it. It's a little vibrant, but I think it kind of goes with that 70s style, because it doesn't look like it doesn't look too. It definitely looks orange. But they've got some other ones. This one, the sort of modern Kontiki diver, with the very interesting bezel insert that they've done for I assume different dive times and depths and things. So
yeah, and they seem to be reasonably priced as well, don't they? You can get them for around the $900 mark, it appears. For maybe this is a pre-owned one. But
I'm seeing something like, so this one I'm seeing MSRPs of like €1,300, so $1,500, $1,600, something like that. So that's completely within. I mean, we're talking mechanical. 200-meter mechanical Swiss diver. That's right in the pocket right there. So
Solita movements as well.
So next, a brand I know we mentioned on the pod before, but Certina.
This is an interesting one because you can buy some of the models on Amazon and Joma Shop, but there's some really cool ones that have only recently come to the US.
Yeah, I mean, I was drawn to them I think last week we were talking about they have a GMT, and they have a modified movement that they call the Powermatic. It's an 80 hour movement that they put in. So sort of drawn to that. And then again, they've got a set of retro diver with their cool turtle shell on the back of their case back. It's very cool. So yeah, Certina sort of popping up on Joma and Amazon, but definitely one to check out.
Yeah, they have some good looking quartz ones as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Some nice looking quartz ones. Yeah, that is an interesting one. Definitely check that one out.
And then again, that's 1888 for Swiss watch manufacturing sense. So very cool. Now, here's one that I think pops up more here, but is sort of off the radar, and that's Rado or Rado. I think it's Rado. I'm going to go with Rado. And I know it's been with the Captain Cook, right?
Yep, the Captain Cook.
So with the Captain Cook, I think they in the last couple of years they've definitely popped up on everyone's radar more so. But it's certainly not a brand that I think is ubiquitous in the US. I think they have only recently.
I think it's definitely bigger overseas. I think in India it's quite big. But famously, I don't know whether you know this, but a famous Rado wearer was Colonel Sanders.
Oh,
that was his personal watch.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. He and I only know this because they auctioned it off last year. Oh. And it didn't go for very much. It's amazing. I look on a lot of these auction websites and these movie prop watches, and sometimes you can pick up that Neil Armstrong watch that I was talking about. Only sold for a couple of $200, and these are iconic watches. I think that Rado, that Colonel Sanders one, maybe only got $500 to $700.
Interesting. Yeah.
So it's worth looking on the. There's one actually called the Prop Store, and they sell movie watches. I was looking the other day, and they've got a watch from Wanted on there. I was a bit annoyed that they sold the one from Fury that had the Steve-O strap on it, the Brad Pitt's version, and again that only went for a couple of $100. I think people aren't actively looking at them. Also, some of these watches are movie watches, so they don't necessarily have the internals in them. They're just more show watches.
Right.
It's definitely worth out checking the Prop Store or searching for screen used watches.
That's interesting. Yeah, maybe there's some hidden gems there. Cool.
Yeah. So that's an interesting one. Which is what are you looking at next?
So next up we have Lip, L-I-P. And Lip, I think, sort of came and went because they are known for that very famous sort of modern design where with the 80s with the big dots, the big balls on the side that press the individual pushers in this kind of funky shaped case. That's kind of what they if you've seen about them, that's one of their claims to fame, but obviously not all they do. And we were just taking a look at the website. They make some pretty interesting stuff still.
Yeah, they really do. And I found out about this brand, believe it or not. I've got a book called, I think it's the 50 Watches That Changed the World or something like that. It's the yellow book that you always see in my reviews. It's off to the side there. But that Lip version, the Mech, I think it's called, chronograph, that's in there. That's one of the iconic watches. And interestingly enough, there's another watch on your list as well that also makes it into that book. So you imagine it, 50 Watches That Changed the World would be all well-known watches, but it's that Lip features in there as being a design icon. I'm probably doing this in injustice. It might be that it was made by a famous designer originally, but it's certainly a very iconic watch. It's the Mech 2000 chronograph. You should check it out. There's no other watch that looks like it at all, except for maybe that Seiko, the Gigario design.
Before we go too far on Lip, it looks, I do not know if they are currently doing mechanicals over there. Have they sort of converted only to a fashion quartz design. Interesting. I'm trying to find something that they show the Mach 200. They now have they say they have a quartz version. So they have a modern version.
No, they definitely have. They definitely have mechanicals as well. I'm looking at one here that's skeletonized. So they use. Let me just see if it actually lists the movement here. It's not coming up straight away, but it's we haven't mentioned this before. It's Lip is a French brand. I don't know whether you mentioned that already, Chris, but it just says it's a Miyota. This one's using a Miyota.
Okay.
But it's a good-looking watch. That skeletonized one looks similar to a Zodiac.
Okay. Next up, we've got Triton.
This is one that's popped up on the Facebook group. Triton, I believe they got reinvigorated, I would say. Very famous dive watch for having the crown at the top, and not just the crown at the top, but the bracelet integrates in a way that the bracelet protects the crown.
It's a good way to describe it, yeah.
But yeah, again, a very, certainly for that design, they were an iconic. It reminds me similar of Hanhart as well. They have a military watch that has a distinctive design with a articulated case like that. I mean, Hanhart would be another one that we could add to the list as well.
Certainly. Yeah. Triton is. I think it was. It seems like it was rebooted. A ton of history, and a bunch of iconic designs that they've done, and this one here with the crown on the top, very, very, very cool looking. So, feel like a lot of these are interesting. A lot of these so far have been sort of that retro diver that they've done, but check them out. So, 1963. So almost not an original Swiss, but definitely from the era of dive watches that when we started to get these different cases and different materials in order to make it so that you could get down to depth with a mechanical watch. I'm going to give you the next one because you know what it is. It's a Japanese brand, right?
Yes. Now, this is another one that features in that book that I told you about, the iconic design, and I knew them primarily because of their fragrances or their eau de toilette. They basically also were a fashion brand. The brand's called Izzy Miyake. Very famous. You'll see them in most of the perfume aisle of your local superstore. But they also made watches, and I believe the watches were manufactured by Seiko, but they have one that is a very distinctive design, and it's become almost an icon of theirs. And it essentially is. It has. This is going to be hard to describe without looking at a picture, but right. The tachymeter is on the side of the case, so the case is almost mushroom size. Mushroom case wouldn't be the right way, but essentially around the outside of the case is the tachymeter, and it's become one of their truly iconic designs. It's called the design by Nato Fukasawa. It's the SILAQ001. True name of it is the trapezoid watch, and it makes sense when you see it.
Yeah, it does that sort of a visual illusion. So imagine like a beveled. The best way I could describe it is like a beveled gear or a beveled edge around the bezel that has the projection of the tachymeter all the way around it. So like when you look at it straight on, it's sort of, it's an interesting sort of almost an optical illusion kind of thing. It's kind of cool. Yeah,
it's really good. They do a number of watches, and they're much bigger, I think, in Japan. There's more things that are available. But yeah, it's another one from that book that's iconic, and another one that I think only over here we might get a few of the fashion items, but I certainly have never seen the watches for sale in alongside the fragrances.
And finally, I guess we'll just finish up with this short list. Not a short list, but this list. And listen, before we finish up, if you have any that you know of, these iconic watch brands that just sort of didn't make it to the United States, or maybe fell out of fashion and are no longer being sold here, and have an interesting history that you might have to someday go to another country to buy, make sure to let us know over in the Facebook group and join up over there, and we can continue the conversation. And my last one here is another brand that we've been talking about. So, but certainly one of the ones that I don't think has any sort of presence here, which is Stova. And they have made they're very popular for their Flieger watches. Yeah,
it seems to be one of the ones that watch enthusiasts know about, but again, they're not mainstream, would you say? Certainly over in the US.
Yeah, and I was thinking there is actually, I think we might have a bonus one. Who's the other one that does the Flieger watches? Laco. Your bonus. Yeah.
Well, but Laco is, I believe, and I could be easily corrected on this, but I think they might be owned by the same company that owns Watch Gang.
Oh, interesting.
I think that there's definitely a link there, or Watch Gang might be the distributor, because they popped up at a micro brand show. But yeah, you're totally right. Before I'd seen them there, I'd never seen them in the wild, but they're very Flieger, aren't they? They even have one that they purposely patina. They purposely make it look old. They bash the case up. They damage the loom.
Yeah. So Stova, 1927, Swiss brand, or should I say, German brand, but using Swiss movements, and part of that whole Black Forest German watchmaking tradition that's over there. And then Laco, newer brand, but also German, right?
Yes,
so
I believe so.
Couple of German brands to finish us out that maybe don't get that much love here in the United States.
Awesome. That was a great list, Chris. Yeah, and like you mentioned before, if you've got any extras, head on over to the Facebook group. If you're not already a member, add your membership in there or request a membership and we'll add you on. As always, we really appreciate you listening. And we'll see you next time on Casual Watch Talk. Thanks, guys. Bye.